This is my self-assessment, long awaited. Our first question is like how we came about to picking our scene. We both wanted something that was like more romantic, more of that kind of dynamic, and that dealt with something that was like deeply emotional and more on the darker side, a more serious circumstance, just a strong contrast from like the light playfulness of last mini scene. So we looked at Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, that scene. That was a big contender, but it just wasn't challenging enough for us personally as actors and what we're trying to work on, and making sure that like it's still like the style of scene that we want, but we're still being personally challenged with the character. So it didn't really make the mark there. And then we also looked at Richard II and a scene in there where Queen Isabel, I think, someone like that is like stuck in a tower, and it's like there's a lot of mourning and grieving and heavy, deep, dark emotions, but it was too long, or like the lines, or it was too short. There was something where it didn't match those requirements. So PB gave us a suggestion of what we're doing now, which is Henry VI, and it really it has those deep, heavy emotions. It has the stakes, like really high stakes, and it has the love interests and that dynamic in there. And it also has so many other elements that, like royalty and like the dumb show that's going to be in between, and an affair and like mystery and secrets. So that's how we came upon our scene. It was ultimately suggested by PB, and I think Juan helped her come up with that. And as far as like researching, this research project was a lot harder because we're doing a history. So it was important that I got a lot of historical context, because a lot of it is accurate. So, I mean, I researched just like different productions of like our scene and different companies that had put it on. And also the War of the Roses was a big thing that I focused on, because that's what's going on during our play. And Henry VI and Queen Margaret are big figures in the historical War of Roses. So it was really helpful for me to just really fully flesh out and understand the historical context of what's going on, and like what the climate's like how tensions are in the country, and like Queen Margaret's like stubbornness and overbearingness and control over Henry was a universally understood thing that's not just Shakespeare, and that's what she was known for. So that was helpful for me to know. It really emphasized that for me, like just as far as character work. And yes, just like the dynamic with Margaret and Henry, that like Henry was seen as weaker than, and that's why a lot of things happened, and Margaret was seen as kind of controlling him, and that's why people didn't like her. So it's just needful context that I found a lot of in the research. The textual process was similar. I feel like I've like kind of established a good like starting place, which is I read over it however many times I need to, like I'll pick out all the words that I don't know, go to Shakespeare Words and make sure I find that. I now have like access to the Arden and the folio, so like going through it in class was really helpful, just to like see like different words that are used for different reasons, or that have different roots and meanings and all of those things. So that's always the first thing that I do. And then implementing the character, so like using what I know from the history that I learned, and also just I kind of just like write down like things that I think about like off the top of my head when I think about Margaret, and then just starting to work from there. So not even having that much of a understanding of like her relationship with Suffolk, which became very apparent in our work session. And then that was another thing that I had to add. So now I know who Margaret is and how she acts and where she's from, and like just like her whole history of being French and being brought to England to be queen, and then kind of like having her expectations crushed a little bit, and having to deal with Henry and also be in love with Suffolk, and like how that affects a person. And but then also, how do her and Suffolk affect each other, especially in the scene, and how does that how does that really, like how can that be shown more, and how can that be the undercurrent of everything that we say? And like whether it's physical gestures or eye contact, like that connection is something big that I feel like Dan and I are both finding our way to and beginning to understand more and more. But yes, that's a big part of the scene that was challenging, is like figuring out what their relationship looks like, and how everything they say is like a result of that relationship. And then in our scene, the relationship basically ends, or he gets banished. So having to grieve the loss of that after all this buildup. And so in working together, we were both, I feel, being challenged to have more connection with each other and be more specific about what our relationship is, because it's a very big, important part of the scene. And I feel lucky because we're both willing to do the work and are both passionate about it. And I feel like we take notes very well. And in our rehearsals, we normally like start there, like what notes do we get? Let's like try to work through those notes, and then a lot of times we find other realizations. Or yeah, like when we found a great moment of connection there, and that moment told me that like Suffolk actually thinks this, or Margaret is actually feeling a little bit like this in this moment. So we've had a lot of those like kind of discoveries recently, which has been really cool, because we're both open and respectful of each other. And yeah, so that's been my journey with Henry VI Part 2.